Craig, congratulations.
Thank you.
Really, really enjoyed reading your book. It's a fascinating read, and I have a million questions for you, and I think the next 60 minutes are going to just fly by. But let me start with the title, Tinderbox. If you would, explain why you chose that title, and then I have a follow-up question for you. But the title, it's intriguing, because Tinderbox, again, just if you could explain briefly why you chose that title and how it applies to the HIV/AIDS epidemic.
First of all, thanks very much. I really appreciate it. It's nice to be in the part of the book writing process where people are reading rather than just seeing me suffering in front of my laptop computer and on the phone all night with my co-author. So the idea of the Tinderbox is that HIV is not equally bad everywhere. Certain conditions had to occur for the epidemic to catch fire and to spread in certain places and not in others. And so one of the ideas underlying the book has to do with the science of where HIV started. It starts in a very remote equatorial forest in Cameroon, and it brews up at about the same time that colonialism in that part of the world is particularly rapacious. And so the combination of new transport routes, of new cities, of the rise of prostitution, the decline of traditional social factors, those are the first sparks that cause the epidemic to begin to grow where it does, when it does. And so we thought that was an evocative way to title the book.
So what I'm hearing you say is that there are tinderboxes around the world that can be responsible for the emergence of HIV in specific areas, but the world itself is not a tinderbox. Is that
That's
correct?
right, and that's one of the things that surprises people most about the AIDS epidemic, and surprised me when I started working in this area several years ago, that the genetic scientist who finally nailed down a rough date for when the HIV epidemic starts describes tinderboxes and wet moss. He says most of the world is wet moss. In most parts of the world, there's not that much HIV, and yet in some places, there's a ton, and it's incredibly destructive. So understanding that these two sort of categories exist and allows you to think, okay, what are those factors that keep this virus moving, and what can we do as a world to end it, to turn the whole world into wet moss?
Right, right. You mentioned where the HIV epidemic originated. I think for a lot of Americans, not maybe for some of the policy wonks that are watching this show,
right.
But for a lot of Americans, I think they probably believe that the HIV epidemic started in San Francisco.
Right.
Or if they know enough, Los Angeles and New York, which
Right.
was the site of the studies that the CDC released now a little over 30 years ago, suggesting that there was this mysterious disease that was occurring among gay men. But in fact, that was years after what happened in Cameroon and then the Congo occurred that led to both the development and the spread of HIV. Drill down, if you would, just a little bit into how that happened, how you believe the epidemic started in those areas, and you commented on colonialism and trade routes and things of that sort. Delve into that just a little deeper, because I find that really fascinating, is that there in fact was a tinderbox, but it was many years ago, and then there was another tinderbox, and that was in urban areas where there was high concentration of gay men in the United States. But let's go way back to the beginning.
Okay, so the precursor to HIV is a simian virus called SIV that many different types of gorillas, apes have, and the particular virus was in a community of chimpanzees in southeastern Cameroon, and had been there for thousands, probably tens of thousands of years. And the scientists who study this transmission theorize that it probably made its way into the human population repeatedly over the years, right? And what happened is humans catch chimps to eat them. They butcher them in the process of cutting up the chimp. Maybe they cut their hand. And the virus moves from the chimpanzee's blood into the human blood, becomes HIV. So that maybe happened many times, but it did not start an epidemic many times. In order for HIV to actually spread widely, you needed the first people who got it to be in contact with other people and to be able to move around. And so what becomes crucial when the exact strain of HIV that has caused most of the deaths in the world starts, is that you have the intrusion of colonialism into these places that were not terribly dense before. So in these remote regions where the chimpanzees lived, you have porters going right through these parts of the jungle that were very lightly populated, the most sparsely populated part of a not terribly populated continent. And so we believe that one of those porters probably was the first person infected, and they're carrying ivory tusks, they're carrying rubber sap, they're carrying gear and guns for their colonial masters. And so these porters then come back to trading stations that are on rivers, and these rivers have steamships on them now because the Belgians and the Germans and the French are exploiting this part of Africa to make money. So it looks very much as though you have an initial spark of the virus coming out of this very remote area, coming down to the rivers, getting on the steamships, and then going down to what was then Leopoldville, which was a new kind of city, a city founded by the Belgian colonialists to basically to trade with the world, to extract the resources from Africa. And so Leopoldville becomes the center of the early epidemic, and it stays there. So between somewhere around 1900, 1910, until somewhere around 1960, HIV probably exists only within, maybe 100 miles of Leopoldville. And it's later, when decolonialization happens, when Leopoldville becomes Kinshasa, that HIV begins to move out of this immediate area where it had brewed up. And one of the places it goes is to Haiti. And that is because during the period immediately after the Belgians leave Congo, there's amazing political destruction, there's rioting, and the society feels on the verge of collapse. So the United Nations brings in a bunch of French-speaking expatriates from Haiti and from other countries to be nurses and doctors and teachers and technocrats. And it looks very much as though one of them contracts HIV in Kinshasa, flies back to Haiti, and every single strain of HIV they now contract in Europe or the Americas can be traced back to that single original infection in Haiti.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. In fact, I was going to ask you about that, and I was going to ask if it's an oversimplification based on my read that you're suggesting, as you just did, that that you actually suggest Duvalier sent educated classes to the Congo to help, to keep them out of politics in Port-au-Prince, and that someone or some group contracted HIV, came back to Haiti. The thing that you didn't mention just now is that you mentioned in the book that Haiti at the time was a popular tourist destination for gay Americans, and you seem to suggest that that's possible, if not probably how HIV then moved from Haiti into the gay American population. Is that accurate, or is that oversimplification? Because it certainly makes sense, but it's not a theory that I've really heard before, quite frankly.
Yeah, it's hard to know exactly what the nature of the transmission was from the sort of the seeds in the New World in Haiti to the American population. And you're right, at that point it's predominantly gay men. So it could have been a gay man in Port-au-Prince. It could have been a Haitian immigrant to South Florida. It could also have been the blood trade. An awful lot of blood for plasma was donated in Haiti, and plane loads of it made its way back to the United States and was made into blood products for hemophiliacs. So the exact connective moment is actually obscure to us even now, but one of those three things likely happened. And the other thing I think is worth mentioning is by the time this moment happens where this infection goes from Kinshasa over to Haiti, there was probably no stopping this epidemic. It was going to make its way into other parts of Africa, eventually other parts of the world. So in a way, the Haitian story, which has always been a little bit controversial, particularly to the Haitians, it's happenstance, if you will. Maybe it would have happened 5 years later or 10 years later, but one way or another, HIV had gotten big enough in the Congo, and the Congo was connected to enough places by railroads and air and such, that eventually this virus was going to get out at that point.
Okay, well, let's go back across the ocean to the Congo and to sub-Saharan Africa.
Right.
And I'd like you to discuss